everybody. My name is Maggie Osborne. I'm the Vice President for Network Engagement and Partnerships at First Book, and one of the founding members of the Diverse Books for All Coalition that is co-presenting today's webinar. We welcome you from the Diverse Books for All Coalition. We ask you to continue to put your name and introduce yourselves in the chat so we know who is on the call as we continue to welcome people. I see those numbers continuing to climb, so it's really exciting. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what this session is all about. In partnership with Raising a Reader, we've put together a webinar series. They have called it Pages of Inclusion, Celebrating the Need for Diverse Books in Early Learning Spaces. And through that series, they have delved into an exploration that lays the foundation for using diverse books to create culturally relevant classrooms, nurture conversations about race, identity, and belonging, and promote early learning concepts. Today's webinar, Advancing Early STEM Learning with Diverse Books, is the fourth in the series and is providing participants information on the current use of diverse books to promote STEM early learning concepts, to look into what it's like to work in the current landscape as a publisher, author, and educator, as well as practical tips on what to look for when developing your own library of diverse STEM books and how to use these titles in the classroom and beyond. We really look forward to continuing this partnership and a great conversation today. I'd like to take just a minute to tell you a little bit about the Diverse Books for All Coalition. This is a coalition of not-for-profit member organizations. There are now over 60 members of the group that have come together around the idea that every child deserves to be represented and have access and availability to diverse books that reflect them, their cultures, their communities, their identities, and is enough to inspire both their dreams and empathy in the world. So those are kind of representative of the vision of what the group came together to do. We are a group of folks that are committed to advocating on behalf of our members and their needs, but we also have come together to try and influence the ways in which these books are created, by whom they are created, how many are created, and how we have access to them. We're in a really difficult moment in time, and so the effort to come together with a collective voice in participation of creating these books, but also in keeping books on shelves. We know that more than 2/3 of fourth graders were unable to read proficiently, according to the 2022 National Assessment of Education Progress. And among children of color, more than 80% were not proficient. We also know that our kids are diverse, but our books aren't. 53% of US children today are of color. Yet out of 3,450 children's books published in the US in 2022, 493 have Black or African American primary or significant secondary characters in fiction, or human subjects in nonfiction setting or topic. Only 369 feature Asian, 238 feature Latine, and 60 feature Indigenous peoples. We know that reading stories with authentic portrayals of diverse characters from an early age help children develop strong senses of self and empathy for others, as well as a love for reading and critical early literacy skills. The Diverse Books for All Coalition is really proud to join with Raising a Reader in this series, and we will continue to fight so that educators, librarians, folks in communities, early childhood educators all have access to the books they need to serve the children that we all care about and want to see have a happy and full life. So again, I thank you for joining us today. I'm going to introduce Raising a Reader, but first I'd like to say thank you to them for their incredible role as a member of the coalition and providing incredible resources to early childhood educators and others who are seeking to ensure that we raise a country of literate and happy and adjusted children, and that we do this through the love of books as well as the reflection of books of the children that are around us that we care about in our communities. So thank you for hosting the series, and I'd like to introduce Michelle Siosin-Hyman, Senior Vice President of Programs and Partnerships for Raising a Reader. Michelle?
Thank you so much, Maggie. On behalf of Raising a Reader, I also want to extend our thanks to the Diverse Books for All Coalition. It has been an honor to be part of this collaborative and passionate group of folks who are really committed to ensuring that all children and families have access to diverse books, which has been core to Raising a Reader's mission since our founding 25 years ago. At Raising a Reader, we believe that early literacy and family engagement are cornerstone to creating equity for all, which means for us, diverse books are a true necessity. They are powerful tools for celebrating identity, fostering belonging, and exposing new ideas and experiences, all of which are crucial to igniting the love of reading, learning, and ultimately later school and life success. So before we dive into today's session, just a few housekeeping items. So first one is this is being recorded. And then also slides will be sent out to all registrants. And then as we're going along, if you have questions for our speakers, please put them in the Q&A. We will have a Q&A session after the panel. With that, here is a high-level overview of what you can expect for today's agenda. It's going to kick off with research and some practical applications. And then we will hear perspectives from our panel, which includes an author, educator, and publisher. And then we will wrap with the joy of an author read aloud. So with that, let's get started. And as a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A section, and then they'll be addressed after the panel. So up first will be award-winning author and researcher Melissa Stewart, who will review what the STEM landscape regarding diverse books looks like, as well as the benefit of expository nonfiction. She will share data around the underutilization of nonfiction and how that affects STEM learners. Using her own book, Melissa will also share how to use these in the classroom and at home. So while she's bringing up her slides, I'll tell you a little bit more about Melissa. So Melissa has written more than 200 science books for children, garnering such awards as the Seibert Honor Subaru Prize for Excellence in Science Books, 18 NSTA Outstanding Science Trade Books for Students, 2 Green Earth Book Awards, and 3 ALA Notables. She co-wrote 5 kinds of nonfiction, enriching reading and writing instruction with children's books and perfect pairs, using fiction and nonfiction picture books to teach life science. She also maintains the award-winning blog Celebrate Nonfiction. So with that, I will turn it over to Melissa.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for including me in this webinar. I thought I'd start out by showing some of the wonderful STEM nonfiction books being published today. Once upon a time, most scientists looked like this, or at least that's what most people thought. And so children's books about STEM topics were created for kids like these. And it wasn't just STEM books, it was all books. But thanks to organizations like We Need Diverse Books, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, and the Diverse Book for All Coalition, which is one of the co-sponsors of this webinar, things are starting to change. You can see how there's slow but steady improvement in these stats, which focus on marginalized racial and cultural groups. To be honest, we need better data for other traditionally marginalized community going forward. Here's data for 2019 versus 2023 for books by diverse creators and books about diverse characters and topics. So things are improving, but there's still a long way to go. But STEM is lagging behind. STEM books are lagging behind. In publishing circles, we often hear that this is a reflection of the STEM workforce, that there just aren't enough diverse STEM scientists or STEM writers, so there aren't enough diverse STEM books. But let's look at the actual data. Here's some data for the general workforce. Yes, here is the STEM workforce. Yes, we need more Black and Latina scientists, but their numbers aren't as bad as we've often been led to believe, especially compared to statistics for the children's publishing workforce. Clearly, children's publishing industry has a long way to go. The point is, we can't just blame the STEM workforce for the lack of diverse books. We need to look deeper. And the answer lies in intersectionality. In children's books, there's a bias against STEM. Most editors, book reviewers, award committee judges choose their careers because they're strongly drawn to literature and the humanities, not STEM topics. And that absolutely influences the books that are being published and celebrated. In addition, bias against children's nonfiction is pervasive in society among teachers and parents and booksellers, the media, all of us. And as one quick example, there's no New York Times bestseller list for children's nonfiction. Why is that? So you can start to see how intersectionality comes into play. We have more categories being combined that all face different biases. And so that leads to the final result where we don't have as many diverse STEM nonfiction books as we really should. So now let's take a few minutes to dig deeper into the bias against nonfiction, because that's really what's at the root of this. Research shows that most children enjoy reading nonfiction and many prefer it. Here's some of the data, and here's even more. You'll notice that many of these research studies have been done within the last few years. So this is a growing understanding that we're starting to have. So research also shows that for some children, nonfiction is a good gateway to literacy. Here's what some of the things that kids are saying for themselves. I like nonfiction because you gain knowledge, then you ask more questions. Nonfiction is better than fiction because it has real helpful facts about life. Reading stories is too stressful. I'd rather just learn information. That's an interesting one. I like that nonfiction books really make you think about things for a while, and then sometimes your thinking changes. And isn't that really what we want for all of our young readers? Here's a quote from Heather Stimson, who is the Chief Program Officer of Room to Read, which is a global literacy organization. Children want nonfiction books. Adults may be their barriers. A child learning to read with fiction text alone misses a unique opportunity to pique an independent interest in reading. At home, adults favor fiction for bedtime reading and books as gifts, even when they prefer nonfiction themselves. At school, teachers favor fiction for classroom instruction, book talks, book displays, book clubs, read-alouds. In classroom libraries, you'll find 4 times more fiction books than nonfiction books. Meg Medina, who is the current National Ambassador for Young People's Literature and also a celebrated children's book author, says, you have kids in your class who really like the facts and interesting things they can hold on to. Plus, the quality of nonfiction that's coming out now is just over the top. I think nonfiction has a lot to offer. Because of all this new research and because of the pervasive misunderstanding about the importance of nonfiction in children's lives, the National Council for Teachers of English adopted a nonfiction position statement in January 2023. And I've included a QR code here. I hope that some of you will follow this to the link. You can also Google NCTE nonfiction position statement and it will pop right up. As we start to think about the wide world of nonfiction, the first thing to understand is that there are 2 nonfiction writing styles, expository nonfiction and narrative nonfiction. Expository nonfiction explains, describes, or informs. It's perfect for many STEM topics. And narrative nonfiction tells a story or conveys an experience. So what these 2 have in common is that they're carefully researched and they're fully faithful to the facts, but they are a difference, and there are some kids that prefer one or the other. You can find out more about expository and narrative nonfiction in an article that I wrote for School Library Journal, which you can access through this QR code or also through my website. But just to sort of look at the writing style preferences and how educators respond to them versus how kids respond to them, I've created this graphic. So here is looking at educators. You can see that only a small slice of educators prefer expository nonfiction. Many prefer narrative. So narrative includes narrative nonfiction as well as fiction. And then you have around a third who enjoy both equally. If you look at the statistics for students, you see something quite different. You can see that many students love expository nonfiction. Far fewer prefer narrative, and there are some, again, in the middle that enjoy both equally. And so this is worth keeping in mind. You may read to escape, to connect with a character, to become immersed in the world of a book, but expository info kids think differently. They aren't interested in making an emotional connection with a main character. They want to soak up ideas and information about the world and how it works and their place in it. They appreciate clear, engaging text with fascinating facts, statistics, patterns, analogies, concepts. These students read to learn. They are curious, they feel a sense of wonder, they experience joy as they gain knowledge. And these are many of our budding scientists of tomorrow. Children, educators, parents, and caregivers, all of us need to be more aware of and have greater access to high quality nonfiction. This is an equity issue that cuts across demographic categories. To find out more about this, to read deeper in more detail, I recommend this article, Breaking Down Barriers Between Budding Scientists and the Books They Crave. There's a QR code here to an article that was published in Science and Children, which is the journal of the National Science Teachers Association. So as we think about the wide world of nonfiction and what it has to offer young readers, there are a lot of different ways that we can think about it. And we're used to sort of dividing fiction into different categories: mysteries, historical fiction, realistic fiction. But nonfiction can be divided into similar categories. It goes far beyond the traditional nonfiction that pretty much was all there was available when we were kids. The nonfiction market is exploding. This is the golden age of nonfiction. And so 4 out of 5 of these categories have an expository writing style, the books that kids really love. Recognizing these categories can help students and teachers and all adults, parents, caregivers, to predict the kind of information that they'll find in a book, how that book will be presented, to identify the kinds of nonfiction they enjoy reading the most, and determine the best way to write about a topic. And all of these things are important depending on how the book is being used. What kind of task? Is it being used for research? Is it being used for independent reading, pleasure reading, or is it being used as a mentor text to help students with their writing? So to find out more about the 5 kinds of nonfiction, there are a couple of QR codes here. One is to this anchor chart, which teachers can use in their classrooms with students. There's also a general overview of the 5 kinds of nonfiction that's available here. You can also find out more about the 5 kinds of nonfiction on my website. And I also have co-authored a book with Marlene Correa, who is a literacy educator, called The 5 Kinds of Nonfiction. In addition, I've co-authored another book that might be of interest called Perfect Pairs: Using Fiction and Nonfiction Books to Teach Life Science for K-2. And so this brings together fiction and nonfiction and creates lessons around that pairing of books. Both of these books are available at a discount for the next 2 weeks with the discount code that you see here. I'd also like to take a minute to share a really wonderful quote from Nicola Davies, who is a celebrated UK nonfiction author. If you aren't aware of her work, I would definitely suggest that you take a few minutes to look it up. She has many wonderful books. She says, reading nonfiction aloud requires a different approach. Instead of acting as a performer who must come up with different voices for each character, adults become co-discoverers. What a lovely thing to explore together. It's so empowering for children to realize that adults don't know everything and that learning is a lifelong endeavor. And so I think this really gets to the core of what a nonfiction read aloud can look like, what the power of it is, and how it's a little bit different from a fiction read aloud. And so I know that later on, Teresa is going to be reading aloud from her book. I'm not going to read aloud this full book, but I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to read aloud a little bit of it and then talk about some ways that it can be used in either at home or at school to help reinforce STEM learning. So this book is a fusion of math and science and art and literacy. And I'm just going to read you the first few spreads to help you understand how the pacing goes, how the rhyme works, and the integration between the beautiful illustrations and the text. See the series of circles? There, see the square? So this spread has so much built into it. We have rhyme, we have punctuation, we have math, geometry, scale, earth science, landforms. All of these can be part of the conversation surrounding this book. So we have see the series of circles. There, see the square. Shapes in nature, they're everywhere. And so in this spread, you can look at plants versus animals. You can look at earth and space science, rocks, fossils, minerals, and more landforms. We have everything all in this. You can talk about color. You can talk about patterns and form. All this conversation just from one spread as you're exploring this topic of shapes in nature. You might spot a rectangle or ovals in a nest. You can see there's even more connections that you can make here. Or a trio of triangles rising in the west. And so the book continues introducing all these different shapes that are in nature with this lovely, fun rhyming scheme, accompanied by just stunning photos that were taken all over the world. So here you can see in this spread, you have alliteration, for literacy, you have alliteration. For earth science, you have more landforms. For life science, you can talk about ecosystems, all in this one spread. And then as you get to the back matter of this book, there are some games and activities that are embedded. So for example, we have here, how many shapes can you find? So we have a shape and search kind of activity right in the book. And then when you go to the next spread, you can see that those shapes, some of those shapes are highlighted, and there's additional details about the origin of all of the different shape names. Also in the back matter of this book, actually I should say before I get to that, you can also do an indoor shape scavenger hunt around the room. Look for squares, look for triangles, look for circles, look for all the different shapes right there in the classroom as you're leading into the activity at the end of the book, which is looking for shapes in nature. And there are some instructions here that will encourage you to go out into the schoolyard, into a local park, into your backyard, into a local wooded or grassland area. You can take a nature walk with students. You can keep a tally of the different shapes that you see. So again, kids are building data collection skills, observation skills. You can also pair this book with a fiction book. One of my favorite books is The Hike, which is a fiction story talking about three girls who are taking a hike and all the things that they see along the way. So it really pairs perfectly with this book, Shape Search. And then finally, you can create some shapes using paper of different natural objects, different natural creatures. And this can also lead to doing drawing of all different kinds. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the children's book author Grace Lin. On her website, she has some wonderful videos that show how she starts off with sometimes with a shape or sometimes with a number or a letter, and she creates various different illustrations of common objects, of common creatures, common animals, line by line, helping kids to see the shapes in that drawing, to see the numbers or the letters that are embedded in that drawing, and She is also an author of a really great series on STEM and math, which I hope some of you will have a chance to take a look at. So now I am going to turn it back over to Michelle. Let me stop sharing.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. Really appreciate that. And for sharing the critical work on the importance of recognizing the categories of nonfiction to foster children's intrinsic learning interests. It's such an honor to have you here today, sharing your tremendous contribution to the field. And as a reminder, if any of you have any questions for Melissa, please put them in the Q&A section, and then Melissa will join us again at the end of the, after the panel. So with that, I am really excited to introduce you to Jessica Young and Kristen Reed from Education Development Center, who will share some of their research around science and math talk at home and in the classroom. They will provide an understanding of knowing what early math and science is, and how do you use books and stories to elevate these topics, and using some specific examples. So as they are bringing up their slides, I will share more about their work. So Jessica Young is Principal Research Scientist, and Kristen Reed is Managing Project Director at Education Development Center. Jessica is a developmental psychologist and early childhood expert. Her research has provided new insights into learning and cognition, promoting equity, narrowing STEM opportunity gaps, and creating authentic, engaging, and innovative learning experiences that bridge formal and informal spaces. She designs and studies learning experiences that power up STEM engagement at home, in school, and in communities. Kristen works closely with teachers and families to design learning experiences for children that explore the richness and beauty of mathematics. Her work leverages school-home partnerships to expand access to mathematics learning opportunities for children from communities traditionally underrepresented in STEM fields. She leads studies that iteratively design and test innovative evidence-based resources for teachers, families, and children. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jessica and Kristen.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Kristen and I are excited to be here to talk about our work in math and science, and talk a little bit about our research developing science and math programs that support young children's STEM thinking. So at the Education Development Center at EDC, we have a long stream of work in early childhood science, starting with the Young Scientists series. And over time, we have increasingly moved towards a combined focus on engaging families and supporting multilingual learners. Currently, I direct the Supporting Science Inquiry, Interest, and STEM Thinking for Young Dual Language Learners, or SYSTEM project, funded by the NSF, which maintains that focus on multilingual learners and increases its emphasis on working with teachers around establishing and maintaining authentic partnerships with families, while also maximizing the connection between science, language, and literacy. Additionally, Kristen and I have been co-directing the Young Mathematicians program since 2013. We started with a focus on using math games to promote persistence in preschool classrooms, specifically Head Start, who serve children between the ages of 3 and 5. But we found that teachers were often nervous about introducing new math topics in their classroom. But when they used a picture book, whether a narrative story or informational text, teachers felt more confident and comfortable doing math in their classroom. From there, we heard from teachers that they really wished their families could learn more about early math and have access to the math games and resources, again, in multilingual contexts. So we began developing and testing early math resources with families and teachers that could be used across home and school settings. Now, in our most recent work, we've been engaging with communities to support teachers, families, and community organizations like libraries and YWCAs to do family math so that children have opportunities to experience mathematics across all the contexts where they are learning and living. Now, often we think about science and mathematics as different disciplines, separate from other content areas such as language, literacy, SEL, creative arts. But we know that the real world doesn't look like that. It looks more like this Jackson Pollock inspired painting. And while each of the 4 STEM subjects, which include science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, deserves individual attention in school, the subjects are often discussed in terms of how they combine and connect with one another. In fact, STEM activities support not only the development of math and science skills, but research shows that they also provide rich and engaging opportunities to strengthen language skills. Science provides that real-world context for children to use their math, language, and literacy skills as they explore and problem solve and work to communicate their understanding of the world around them. Importantly, math and science are deeply intertwined, as Melissa was showing us in some of those nonfiction books, with mathematics serving as a fundamental tool that helps us to understand and explain the natural world. The perspective we take in both of our projects, in SysSTEM and Young Mathematicians, is that when science and math are integrated with other subject areas, such as language arts, teachers can provide an even richer context in which to talk and think about math and science. While children enjoy engaging with all aspects of STEM, in this talk, we're going to be focusing primarily on science and math. All children are primed to engage with and enjoy science and math from an early age. And high-quality math and science experiences in the early years really lay that foundation for children to explore, understand, and actively engage with the world around them, fostering not only mathematics and scientific literacy, but holistic cognitive, language, and social-emotional development. More and more research is pointing to the importance of early math and science skills for children and the value of supporting early educators and families in science and math teaching and learning. We know that what young children learn about math and science by the time they enter kindergarten actually has an outsized impact on their long-term academic outcomes. So setting children up early with the STEM tools they need has lasting positive benefits. Unfortunately, opportunities to engage with high-quality science and math experiences are not evenly distributed, and children from historically underserved communities often face systemic opportunity gaps that create unequal access to STEM experiences. The result is that there is both a science opportunity gap and a math opportunity gap that starts before children enter kindergarten. It's also important to note that preschool teachers traditionally have not been well prepared to support science and math experiences, particularly those that incorporate language learning supports for multilingual learners. In addition, science and math are not culturally neutral. Many of us grew up with narrow, entrenched notions of what counts as STEM and who is seen as STEM capable, again, as Melissa was showing us earlier. This has led to pervasive deficit notions that often result in a focus on what children and families lack. But one of the key aspects of our science and mathematics work is to invite all children, teachers, and families into math and science in joyful ways. Unfortunately, STEM and mathematics in particular, has often been a gatekeeper that has kept people out. We want to change that narrative and welcome people in. Our hope is that through diverse STEM books and activities that are meaningful to children and families, we can shift that perspective on who can do STEM, and build on children's natural curiosity and intuitions about STEM. It really is important that we shift that narrative, because while the number of people from groups traditionally underrepresented in the STEM workforce has grown, we need to make faster increases in order for the STEM workforce to be representative of the US population by 2030. To achieve that, the National Science Board, where this slide comes from, estimates that the number of women in science and math fields must nearly double. Hispanic or Latinos must triple, and Black and African Americans must more than double. As part of our work to shift that narrative, our SysSTEM project aims to support language-enriched science experiences that fuel all children's science inquiry interest, and language development with a focus on dual language learners by powering up school, home, and community with science and literacy learning. This may be a good time to mention that our primary focus was on Spanish-speaking children and families because they represented a high percentage of families in the schools that we were working with. Therefore, all of our family resources were made available in English and Spanish interpretation was provided at any events that parents participated in. The system program provided books, materials, and guidance for teachers to share with families to support home explorations. We engaged teachers and families in virtual and in-person teacher-parent workshops, provided online curriculum resources that were shareable with families in English and Spanish, and included physical science topics that were introduced in the classroom around water, ramps, and shadows. In addition, the Connecticut Science Museum, our community partner, hosted free events for families and teachers and included guidance on exploring the galleries in English and Spanish and provided opportunities to interact with Hispanic STEM professionals who are also from the community. Our research showed that by connecting home, school, and the community, both teachers and families felt more confident and comfortable promoting their children's science learning. Parents of multilingual learners were also more interested in supporting science with their child. The system project also promoted the idea with teachers and families that children's primary language is an asset for learning STEM. Research shows that multilingual learners' English language knowledge builds on their home language knowledge. So when children have opportunities to use their home language and are exposed to many different concepts and words in their home language, they gain speaking and listening skills in their home language, which they can use as they begin to learn English. So science concepts take time and many experiences for children to learn, which, unlike facts, can be learned quickly. So understanding a concept and understanding the language to describe it go hand in hand. In the case of multilingual learners, this means to support science learning, it's important to support children's concept and language learning, not only in English, but in the home language. And as this quote from one of the families in our project shows, the materials, books and tip sheets you gave us were also in Spanish. When I see the words in both languages, I understand more. The teacher told me to use the science words related to each topic in Spanish at home, and I did it, and now my son is using it too. So research also points to the critical importance of families for learning science. In fact, families are the primary influence on children's sustained science interests and self-identities, because families make doing and learning science real, important, and meaningful. And opportunities for science inquiry are naturally embedded in everyday family life, routines, and activities. And we want all children to develop a positive self-identity around STEM, to see themselves in STEM, and to see and hear diverse representations of who is STEM capable, because supporting STEM early really does open doors for a successful future. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, who's going to talk a little bit more about our early math work.
Thanks so much, Jess. So we've taken the same approach in our young mathematicians work, really focusing on bringing the joy of math to all the places where children live and learn, and bringing in children and families' rich, diverse experiences to try to make their math learning more authentic and meaningful, as well as doable in daily life. So I'm going to take a second to just say, what is early math, right? So it's much broader than I think we typically think. Usually adults remember learning computation as one of their first math experiences, but we've all had so many more math experiences before that, right? As babies first experience the world around them, they're noticing attributes like what's hot and what's cold, more or less. They're sorting their experiences into categories that help them make sense of the world and build their language skills. Children are also noticing patterns. The pattern of their daily routines is huge, like the bedtime routine, dinner, bath, book, song, kiss, bed. And the patterns in kids' songs, the hokey pokey or head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And this relates to the patterns they'll see in the number system later on. Their number system grows by 1 each time we count. And in school, they'll practice counting by 2s, 3s, and notice other patterns, patterns of even numbers, patterns in square numbers, triangular numbers. So all of these topics could go into lots and lots of depth, but for now, we're going to have the list there. So a lot of these early math concepts are, of course, also used in science. So not surprisingly, research has confirmed that when young children hear more math talk and do more math activities at home and connect with schools around math, children's math learning improves. For a couple specific studies, research has shown that when grown-ups engage toddlers in advanced number concepts during play with blocks and other toys, it predicts their later math skills at 4.5 years old, as well as at 6 and 7 years old. And likewise, in other studies, when adults provide support for spatial skills, such as using more spatial language or gestures or thinking about the placement of objects when playing with puzzles with little kids, with toddlers, it predicted their later math skills into 2nd grade. So the more we can provide these opportunities to include rich math language and experiences in children's lives, the more they will grow in their math learning. And then, of course, books are a great way to support math talk at home and at school. In particular, the research is showing that shared reading is an effective way to promote early numeracy understanding and mathematics language skills. So several studies, and I believe these were all with narrative books, but it would be great to have some with nonfiction as well, found that when parents and teachers are prompted to include math language when reading storybooks, that builds children's early math language and their numeracy skills. And this was true even in studies lasting only 8 weeks, 8-week intervention. So knowing all this, we worked on some research studies connecting family math and connecting school homes and schools. And so we created a professional learning program as part of an NSF-funded research study that provided math picture books for teachers to use in the classroom, provided math games and math mini books that could be used both at home and at school, connecting those learning environments. We also had text messages to families that included a math tip. And our results from the study showed that we had 3 conditions in the study. That first, business as usual, so teachers use their regular curriculum. We had a condition that was our young mathematicians' professional development with classroom games. And then a condition that was the classroom games, the professional development, and a family math component, which included the mini books and the text messages. And we found that children who were in the family math condition and played those games at home and at school had higher math scores at the end of the year than did the children who were in the business as usual condition. So all of that, supporting the importance of including lots of math talk and lots of early experiences that books are really great at supporting. So on the next slide, we are gonna give you a chance to participate in the chat. So if you could get ready to write, take a look at this picture. What do you notice and what do you wonder? And so I'm going to keep chatting while hopefully the chat fills up with things that you notice and you wonder. And this is very similar to what Melissa was saying about her book, where you can just take a page and really delve deep into the images in it and talk about it. And that kind of talk is so important for building children's math skills, right? So often people say things like, I see green fruit and I see red fruit, right? And they could wonder, right, 2 colors, they're similar shapes. They all are kind of rounded, similar shapes. I see, yep, red and green, 2 colors, 2 sizes, wondering why there aren't fruits of there aren't fruits with other colors. Great. You can be very specific. There's 3 lines and 3 tomatoes, so an equal number of each of those. Could wonder if they're having a snack. Oh, and I like wondering if there's the same number of grapes and grape tomatoes, right? It's a little hard to see. We might have to estimate for those green grapes whether how many there are, because some of them might be hidden back there. Oh, I love the noticing textures, right? That there's different textures, different sheen on those different fruits. Really, really lovely. So lots of rich vocabulary. You can notice that the grapes and some of those tomatoes are coming in clusters. So the more you can use very specific attribute language as you're describing images with children, the more their language and language skills are going to develop, which supports their STEM skills as well. Oh, somebody sees a star. That is awesome. Yeah, why are the red shiny and the green are not? Love those questions. So great questions to explore with kids. So we're going to take a look at one book that we often share with the teachers that we work with in professional development that we love. It's called The Animals Would Not Sleep, and it is a book in the fabulous Storytelling Math series from Charlesbridge, and we'll hear more from the editor later. So brief synopsis about this book. It's bedtime, and Marco, the main character, his stuffed animals have other ideas. They are making a ruckus, and no matter how Marco tries to settle them down, they will not go to sleep. He tries sorting them by how they move, by their color, by their size, but nothing seems to work to make them sleep. So finally, Marco finds a way to have everyone feel snug and warm and just in time. So in this book, Marco is a scientist, and he's observing, comparing, and grouping the animals according to different classifications. This book is a wonderful launch into any lesson on sorting, grouping, comparing attributes, and ultimately can lead to organizing, graphing, and discussing data. And so on the next slide, you can just see a page from the book where he's got the animals sorted into flying animals, swimming animals, and animals that move on land. And we did the same activity with teachers and families. And this is a photo from one of those days where this little boy is sorting these stuffed animals into 3 baskets by the attribute that he decided. And what I loved about this is that it's so related to really important early math ideas of sorting, right? So first, we want kids at the young ages to know that attributes can be used to sort a collection of objects into different groups or different sets. And then next, we want them to know that you can sort that same collection in different ways, right? And that's what's modeled in that book. And then the third step is that once you've done that sorting, you can compare those sets and see which group has more, which one has fewer. So maybe the animals that move on land are of the most, and maybe the smallest number are, the ones that swim. And then you could graph it. And that has been really exciting to kind of see kids moving along this trajectory from doing the sorting, putting them in different piles, to then being able to order them and count how many in each, and eventually being able to graph and discuss, well, why is it that we have more stuffed animals that walk on land? You can start asking questions about it. So this is a really important STEM habit of mind, thinking about classification and data analysis, but it also is so important in developing children's vocabulary as well. So Jess is going to share another one of our favorite books.
So a great thing about the Charlesbridge Storytelling Math series is that it exposes children to solutions to problems using math through authentic storytelling from the lens of different cultures. So this book, Yumbo Gumbo, a young girl in Louisiana is excited about her first gumbo cooking lesson, but her family of 6 can't decide what kind of gumbo to cook for dinner. The main character, Annabelle, wants okra gumbo, and her little brother, Bo, wants chicken. So they try to resolve their conflict fairly through voting. But when their first votes end in a tie, they add a third choice. And Annabelle is really hoping that this time okra will be the winner. But she can't believe it. That vote ends in a tie too. So the main character solves the story problem through mathematical reasoning. And young children should be able to follow that reasoning as it develops over the course of the story. And this book is great as it also features counting and comparing amounts, sorting and then resorting. It includes data collection and analysis. And one of the things that we really enjoy doing is, again, like we had mentioned at the beginning, we maybe introduce a concept using a book, and then we follow up with maybe a game. So on our website, we have a ton of free videos in English, Spanish, and more in Portuguese, and more are coming in Haitian Creole. So we'll give you a link to that later on. But we wanted to show one of those games that relate to this story. And make sure it plays.
This game is called Mystery Rule. The goal of the game is for kids to guess what rule you're using to sort a set of objects. This is a really fun game for older preschool children who love using clues to solve a sorting mystery. You can use all kinds of items for this game. Pattern block shapes, objects found outside, counter sets, utensils, socks, almost anything. So first think about how you want to sort your collection or group. It could be by size, color, shape, by how you use it, you pick. Then make a group of all the items that follow your rule. You can say, I used a mystery sorting rule to sort these items from the rest of the pile. Can you tell me what my sorting rule was? This can be a challenging game at first, so if children are unsure, ask questions like, what do all of these items have in common? What's the same about all these items? Yes, I sorted by color. These are all green. They all come from trees too, but look, we can see some more leaves over here, so that can't be the rule. Once children have identified the sorting rule, add the items back into the larger pile. Choose a new way to sort the group and start sorting by that attribute. Now, let's play again, this time using pattern blocks. Can you guess my mystery rule? The rule is shapes with 4 sides, or we could also call them quadrilaterals, which is the math term for 4-sided shapes. Which means that this other pile is shapes that don't have 4 sides. And look, I have a little mistake here. This one belongs in the other pile. Sometimes you make a mistake by accident, but it can also be good to make a mistake on purpose, because children love to catch mistakes, and these moments can lead to powerful learning opportunities. You can also play this game by sorting the set of items one by one and seeing if they can guess the mystery rule as you go. So you would start by separating one item out, then pick up another one and say, where do you think this one goes? Nope. Where do you think this one goes? Nope. Where do you think this one goes? Yep. What about this one? Yep. So what might my mystery sorting rule be this time? Right, it's triangles. Once children are ready, have them take turns choosing their own mystery sorting rules for others to solve. This process of sorting, or classification, is an important practice in science and mathematics. Grouping objects and counting how many in each group are skills that kids will use later when collecting and analyzing data to solve problems. Check out our website for more games and lots of other ways to learn.
So we developed.
This game is called.
We developed. We developed these games in partnership with teachers and families, and they requested all of those videos, and they requested the videos to have some of the math language, some of the math concepts, as well as to have them in various languages. So you can check out that website there. But another really great book that features early math is Feast for 10. So this is a classic accounting book, and it's a lively read aloud that features a family shopping for food, preparing dinner, and enjoying a meal together. Math is really part of the plot, and it's intertwined in with the problem or resolution of the story. Children can have fun counting from 1 to 10 and then counting again. And they can think about, what does it take to make a feast for 10 hungry people? Shopping, cooking, setting the table. Everyone in this loving family pitches in to create a colorful and joyful feast. You can follow up this book with an activity around sorting, grouping, and comparing. You could have either at home or at school, have children go shopping using Play Food, sorting and organizing the food by type or color, counting how many, and then again, sorting in a different way. It also lends itself to talking about family traditions and different types of foods families like to cook and eat together, creating a really nice family home connection. So here we have a list of books, of places where you can find really high quality math books, as well as if you check out the NAEYC Early Math Interest Forum and the NAEYC Early Childhood Science Interest Forum, there's lots of ideas that get shared there as well. Like and follow us. We're on YouTube. We post a new game video in 3 languages every week. And if you're interested, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Kristen. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I see some of you already have. And Kristen and Jessica and Melissa will join us after the panel for a full Q&A section. So again, thank you, Jessica and Kristen, for sharing your incredible research resources and the importance of introducing educators and families on how to use diverse books to introduce science and math in joyful and meaningful ways. So now I'd like to welcome our panelists and moderator to the Zoom screen. Our moderator today will be Susan Friedman, Senior Director of Publishing and Content Development at NAEYC. And our panelists will have the opportunity to formally introduce themselves, but I do just want to welcome Alyssa, Executive Editor at Charlesbridge Publishing, award-winning author Teresa Robeson, and Sabrina Burrows, Early Learning Educator with DC Public Schools. Susan, take it away.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Okay. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. I missed the prep at the beginning, so I'm just trying to catch up and make sure I have everything in order. And for some reason, I can't see the other people who are on screen. But let me just, oh, now I can see Sabrina, but not the others. But maybe, okay. There everybody is. Hi, good to see you. So it's great to be here and to see you and to have this conversation with you. And I am wondering if we could start off with each of you talking about just telling us a little bit about, share a little bit about yourself and tell me why are STEM experiences in the early years so important, and share your thoughts on why diverse books offer a wonderful way to introduce STEM concepts in the early years. And Sabrina, you can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sabrina Burrows. I am a career-changing general education teacher in DC Public Schools, DC District of Columbia Public Schools. This is my 18th year teaching. Before this, I was a systems analyst, and I was really entrenched in science and technology. And I began to really bring it alive in my classroom. So I became certified in a couple of different things, and also using Makerspace and other activities like mentoring other teachers to bring about what connects other content areas in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as a whole into the general education classroom. I really love what I do, and I like to make sure that it's a part of the process that we do every single day. So thank you for letting me be a part of this, Susan.
Great, thank you, Sabrina. And Teresa, I'm just wondering if you can introduce yourself and just share a little bit about yourself and why you think STEM experiences in the early years are so important, and why you think diverse books offer a wonderful way to introduce STEM concepts to young children.
Those are a lot of questions. So hi, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm Teresa Robeson, and I am an author of picture books and middle grade so far. I'm the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association's Picture Book Award winning author of oops, pointing the other way again, Queen of Physics, which is, of course, about a diverse person and STEM. And I have sort of made it a career now of writing about STEM topics, science topics, and bringing in my own culture. So my brand of diversity, because of course I can't cover everybody else's diversity. There's a lot of, different folks out there. So as for why I think it's important, well, my family is completely immersed in science. We just love it. And while we homeschooled, I have so much respect for what you teachers do, because homeschooling my 2 kids drove me crazy. But it was really good. It was really good. But we just did a lot of science and math things from an early age, and I think that's what's really helped, particularly my older child, in becoming interested in science as a career, following, I guess, his father's footsteps in pursuing an academic career in the sciences. And oh, gosh, that's, like I said, there's a lot of information to try and pack into those 2 questions that you have brought up. And also, I'm wondering, are those going to be related to the 2 other questions that I was supposed to be prepared for?
Yes, I'm going to ask you to expand. I'll ask you to expand upon a couple of things. And one question I have for you is about the inspiration behind the book that you're going to be reading. So that's the one that you should prepare for. And I think you're probably ready to answer it. But thank you. Yeah, I lumped a lot of questions with Sabrina. I just sort of got to the first 2 part, and then I sort of went on and asked them all. So I'll give Alyssa a mix. Alyssa, you can, I would love it if you would introduce yourself and also talk a little bit about children's books as a way of offering STEM concepts to young children. And then you're welcome to talk about some of the other things I mentioned, but it seems like maybe it's too much all at once.
Okay, well, thanks, Susan. I'm Alyssa Mito-Pizzi, and I'm an editor at Charles Bridge Publishing. We're an independent publisher right outside of Boston. So I started off as an editor in the school division, and I was working on curriculum materials and picture books for the classroom. But then I moved over to the trade division, and now I edit books that have appeal for schools, libraries, and bookstores. I'm primarily a nonfiction editor and the nonfiction program manager at Charles Bridge. I am also the series co-editor of Storytelling Math, which Jessica and Kristen told you a bit about. It's an ongoing series of fiction, board books, and picture books that bring together diversity, math, and storytelling. So my hope with these STEM books that I'm working on, and especially diverse STEM books, is that they spark joy and curiosity about how our world works in kids, and they empower children to follow their passions and dig deeper on specific topics that they're interested in, as Melissa said. And I want to offer young readers like an inclusive view of the world and of science and math in particular.
Thank you so much for that. And I think I failed to introduce myself when I started. I'm Susan Friedman, and I'm Senior Director of Publishing and Content Development at NAYC. And, it's really been wonderful listening to the webinar, and I always learn something or hear a particular emphasis on something. And so it's just wonderful to hear from all of you and the speakers who spoke before. And one thing, so my next question is going to be for Sabrina, and I'm just thinking about children and your observations of them as you introduce STEM concepts and materials and using diverse children's books, Sabrina. And I'm wondering if you could describe a particular experience where choosing a book inspired kids, or how it engaged kids, and how diverse books sort of contributes to that engagement.
Thank you, Susan. The most important thing is when we're reading STEM books, they establish real world connections. I have a lot of multi-language learners, as well as African-American students, and then students who come from different countries in my classroom. It's a very diverse classroom within my school. So it attaches to whatever subject matter we're going to do. It also empowers family discussions, which I'm really excited about. So I've been doing these monthly family discussions on what we're doing in class as kind of a contribution to the dinner table, so to speak. So students are able to go to their homes and talk about what they're reading, what they're learning, and be able to bring that into context at home so they can have a visual understanding of that. Also, they're able to create objects which are incorporated into the stories. For example, we were just reading a story called What's Intuition recently, and the students were really confused about the word intuition, but when we broke it down, the students were able to do a reader's theater to kind of build it out and act it out, and then they were able to make resources to go with the story. When we talk about something as simple as the 5 senses within that story, they're able to connect to related stations. So I've made these station bins, and within those station bins, it's attached to the story. So I'll have the story ready, whether that's a fiction story or nonfiction story. I'll have the story ready, and then we pull out the vocabulary. I've been able to have peer-to-peer discussions related to the story. Also, having the students have activities that are surrounded by what that story is doing. It's caused some really great diverse discussions about things that happen within their home, things that happen within their lives. We're able to constantly align the resources with the shared units with their families. I've developed an exploration station for some of the STEM books that we're using. So there may be, I get a bucket, and within that bucket, I'll have the story. I'll have the vocabulary that comes out of that story. I will translate the vocabulary so they are in not only French, but Spanish language, because I do have French and Spanish speakers in my classroom, and also have something that's tactile for my my learners who are differently abled, who are really affixed to a different modality. So something tactile, I'll have something kinesthetic, so there's movement. I'll have something auditory. So making sure that resources are inclusive of all learners and all learning styles. More importantly, making sure that I'm incorporating something similar to what Ms. Reed just shared, the image talks. So there may be an image that's related to the story, so they can just go back and talk about that. That image talk may become a tool talk. So instead of just having a picture of grapes and tomatoes, I may actually put the grapes and tomatoes out, which I've done quite a few times. But all in all, the exciting part is I'm building researchers and writers and scientists and technical experts and mathematicians, and it actually embeds into a field trip, an environmental exploration. We're bringing words to life by taking the vocabulary out of the science text or out of the STEM text and building those words into something that's inclusive and real. It navigates us through different landscapes of how we're speaking about nature, and it connects to literacy. So we're able to read books that are about that. I know I'm going on and on and on, but it gets very exciting. So I call it hands-on learning. So we take the book as the resource. We backwards map to the standard. And once we get to the standard, we're building all the activities that go within that standard. And I like to have student input on what that looks and sounds like. So having the students engage into that, into making those resources and making the plan for what they're going to learn builds about what comes next. And it makes the learning exciting. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you answered my question. And you also, I mean, you brought up something really interesting for the teachers who are listening to this webinar, because I think sometimes people feel restricted by the specifics of the materials that they have. And what Sabrina has done is given a little picture into some of the, you know, that it's doable to take a children's book and hands-on materials and integrate it into your curriculum planning and connect it to your learning standards. And I think sometimes teachers in environments where there's more like at the desk worksheet learning, it's hard to figure out how to do that. So that's really exciting to hear about. Alyssa, just hearing some of this real world context for how the books you might you know, be part of creating are used. What are some of the criteria that you think about when you're thinking about the books that you're participating in creating? Like when you're selecting books that you are going to publish, what are all the criteria that you're thinking about? There's the science information, there's the diversity of character, there's expository nonfiction, there's narrative nonfiction, there's fiction, there's all those concepts. Alyssa, I'm just wondering, and then there's also like how the books are going to be read and used. I'd be interested in hearing about that part, your selection process.
Yeah, so okay. First off, I am looking for qualities that make any book excellent, right? So in fiction, I'm looking for that engaging and empowering child main character, someone that the young reader can empathize with and root for. I want a character who's tackling problems and solving them on their own. I want a compelling plot that keeps you turning pages, right? The young reader can't wait to find out what happens next. And heart and authenticity. We need to care about what happens. And then, of course, those social emotional aspects like compassion and compromise. I mean, that's so important. And I love to see that in a STEM book. My co-editor in the Storytelling Math series, Marlene Kleiman from Turk, always says, you know, in everyday life, in the real world, a problem isn't solved by math alone. There's always some social emotional aspect. There's just being human. That's part of that. So I was just going to share two of my favorite diverse STEM fiction books, and one is from the Storytelling Math series. It's Beto's Buried Treasure. It's brand new, coming out this fall. In this book, Beto wants to play Tea Party with his sister Cora, but Cora just wants to play pirates. And so Beto figures out, okay, well, I'm going to make a map to lead Cora to the treasure. And so it's all about mapping and about how do you get people to play with you when you have different ideas of what's fun. And so there's that math and there's that social emotional aspect. And we're really hoping Beto figures it out. So we really care. So that's the math fiction picture book. And here's a great science fiction picture book, Night Owl Night. And in this book, Sova is finally old enough to accompany her mother on a nighttime owl hunt, but it's going to take patience. So there's that built-in suspense in that story. So for good nonfiction books, I am looking for clarity, clear writing that builds the understanding of concepts in an accessible way to kids. I'm looking for accuracy, maybe the author is an expert or they've really done their homework. And going along with that is transparency. What do we know and what don't we know about a topic? And then how does the author know what they know? And that's often, you can find out about that in the author's note or the bibliography or other documentation. And that's really important for teachers and librarians who want to know, and kids who want to know, where is this information coming from, right? And then, of course, as a reader, I'm looking for something new and exciting and fascinating and meaningful. Maybe it's an important but overlooked topic, or so a new topic to me, or maybe it's a new angle on a familiar topic. So for some nonfiction picture books, STEM picture books that I love that are also diverse, Classified by Tracy Sorrell. It's a story of a hidden figure, the first native aerospace engineer who is also a Cherokee math whiz. And Tracy weaves in Cherokee values into the book. And then that's the engineering. And then Your One and Only Heart by Rajani LaRocca. This is a great book that looks at human anatomy through really child-friendly metaphors. Okay, so that's what I look for in fiction and nonfiction. Sorry, Susan, you asked for all the pictures. I'm trying to summarize. But then, like in both fiction and nonfiction, I'm looking for a distinctive, unique voice. And only this author could have written this book in this way. And of course, kid appeal, humor, interactivity, something that makes it fun. And then rereadability, something that's going to keep the reader coming back. And every time they read it, they discover something new and fresh. And then finally, in both fiction and nonfiction, I look for that diverse and inclusive worldview. I know I'm talking too much, but I can, yeah.
I think it's okay. I think we have time for this. Oh. Okay.
All right. Do you mind if I go kind of delve into what I'm looking for in terms of diversity?
You can.
Okay. So, all right. So if the book features diversity in a central way, I'm looking for so maybe like the main character or the subject of the biography is from a specific culture. So I'm looking for, that mathematically or scientifically empowered main character or subject who's depicted in a believable and realistic way. So for instance, Beto is not a math superstar, but he does use math to great effect to achieve his goals. I am looking for rich and nuanced representation that avoids stereotypes, authenticity of characters, settings, plot, and cultural details, and then the author's qualifications for writing the book, right? So are they writing from a lived experience? Do they share the identity of the main character? If they don't share the identity, what experience do they have that makes them the person to write this book? So for instance, Stand as Tall as the Trees is co-authored by Patty Golinga, who's a Quechua activist who helped her community fight back to protect the Amazonian rainforest where they live. So, I mean, she is telling this story because it is her story. And then if the book features multiple characters or subjects, like what's in your pocket, then I want to see a range of diversity, a balanced range, so as many kids as possible can see themselves in the book. And then finally, I'm looking for a range of diversity for the Charles Bridge list. We editors and illustrators editors and designers we do a diversity audit. So we're keeping track of the diversity of our authors, our illustrators, and our characters. And we're kind of seeing, okay, so where are the holes? Well, who are we missing? What are we missing? Where is the representation not there?
Okay, thank you so much. Such a lot goes into the selection process, and we can see that in the books that you're creating. So that's really interesting to hear. And now I have a question for Teresa. And this is really about your book. And I'm just curious if you could share a little bit about what inspired you to write The Queen of Physics, which integrates diverse characters and STEM topics and STEM concepts. When writing narrative nonfiction, how do you balance storytelling with the concepts that you're trying to put forth?
Okay, so for the book I wrote, and for me, writing about diverse people and STEM was, truly a no-brainer, because after all, I am a visible minority and a person of color, and I've been interested in science since, forever, since I was a child. And I really wanted to major in science at university. And strangely enough, I also knew that if I got married, I could only marry a scientist. So for the book, Queen of Physics, I feel like I was the perfect person to tell Wu Qiansheng's story, since we're both Chinese American immigrants, and also we share a love of physics. And but in general, because of my love of science, I also want to tell the life stories of other scientists who have been forgotten by history, notably women and diverse people. Unfortunately, the word on the street is that the market is currently saturated with picture book biographies, so they've been a tough sell. But even when I'm writing STEM topics in general, I try to pull in diverse elements based on, again, as I mentioned before, my own cultural background, because that's what I know best. As for the second part of your question, I tend to agree with Lisa Cron's assertion that our brains are wired for story. So even in the browsable expository nonfiction middle grade that I'm working on, which was just announced this past week in Publishers Weekly and Publishers Marketplace, I wove in some bits of narrative storytelling. I believe that braiding facts into storytelling can help kids remember those facts more. The jokes about how when kids spout off disjointed random facts, however interesting those facts may be, other people's eyes tend to glaze over. But if there's an anecdote to go with it, then listeners tend to tune in more. And this is a win-win, since not only will kids learn new science facts, but if they can keep their listeners' attention, they can also educate others about them. And it feels good to retain other people's attention, which then reinforces the young reader's desire to learn more, so they can, capture other people's attention. Just yesterday, in fact, a physics teacher wrote to tell me that his students were on the edge of their seats as they listened to him read the story of Queen of Physics, to the narrative of it. And he said that it was also relevant to them because they had been studying beta decay, which is, what Wu Cheng had studied. But the fact is that it was the storytelling that made the topic more relatable and real to them, even though, they were also interested in the beta decay.
Thank you so much. That is so interesting to hear that perspective on some of the thoughts behind your book, and also some thoughts on how it's been received. I mean, that was going to be one of my questions, but I'll either tweak it or come up with another question for you. So Sabrina, I'm just wondering about this. I heard somebody talk about this earlier during this webinar, that teachers are sometimes fearful of science topics and math topics and STEM topics. And that children's books make it more accessible and less scary for them. And I'm just curious, I know that you came to the classroom with a science STEM background, but I'm just wondering about your experience of that, either on your own, on a topic you were less familiar with, or with other teachers, the concept of learning together. We're finding this out together. I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
I love science and technology, but math is not my forte. So I had to bring myself into the math world in order to have a better or deeper understanding. So I find myself learning some of those math tools and resources and technologies that the kids are learning now. I find myself learning too. So what I've done with other teachers is we've collaborated and talked about kind of a backwards planning. This is what the kids need to learn at the end. So let's plan out how we're going to get them to do that and what we can do to work together to do that. So we may come together and say, one teacher may say, well, I'm going to do, this auditory lesson, and I'm going to do this kinesthetic lesson, and I'm going to do this tactile lesson. So we'll bring about what the kids need to learn and then come together. And then we have literally, 4 to 8 lessons all at once that the kids can do. And then it bringing in the technology helps to reinforce, especially the kids of today, because they are so technology driven, and they're like it's instinctive with them. They pick it up and they just go for it. So being able to reach beyond that fear of what we don't want to do or what we don't like to do or what's not our forte, bringing other teachers to collaborate together has worked for me. It's worked in my school. We do collaboration twice a week per subject, and we talk about what the kids are expected to do or what they're expected to learn. And then we bring about a literacy connection, a science connection, an art connection, a math connection, an engineering or technology connection all together based on what we're doing. I'm really big on making sure that those books are very inclusive, especially bringing that social emotional connection in, because some kids don't always attach to it. I also have a few friends in my classroom who are on the spectrum, so they learn differently. So you have to think about the students that are learning and what they're learning. And then one of the things that I've been really great at being over the years is bringing families into it. So I may record the lesson and let the family see it so they can have that family discussion and then try the same thing that they're learning at school at home. So it is very inclusive, and the teachers seem to get on board because the kids are excited about it. And if kids are excited about learning, then it increases the teacher engagement.
Thank you for that, Sabrina. Teresa, you did share one example of one teacher and how he used the book and the excitement level of the children. I'm just wondering what else you've heard, if you have any other stories like that to share.
I can't remember past what I had for lunch today.
That's okay.
Off the top of my head, I know I've received other, comments from other people, but I couldn't tell you. It was just fortuitous that it was literally yesterday that the physics teacher contacted me, and I was like, oh, great, I'm going to include that tomorrow.
It was yesterday. And I mean, what was interesting about your example was the the storyline and the character, and then also the facts, and that those were all things that engaged the children. And so it was sort of, your example was a demonstration of all of that. So that was, a wonderful example to hear. When you described being told that the market was saturated with a particular type of book, are there certain trends that you see coming in STEM books for young children, or featuring diverse characters, or certain trends that you wish were there?
Well, for trends coming, I think Alyssa would know more about that than I do. I don't really have my, finger on the pulse of that, but I can answer to trends that I would like to see,
that you would like to see.
which is more biographies. I've actually had other people. I do remember this one example. It was just about half a year ago. Someone was talking to their local librarian who said that they actually want more biographies of especially diverse people. But, the publishing end versus the market, or not market, but the readership end, don't often quite meet in the middle. So for me personally, because I do have several other biographies of scientists and notable diverse people, Chinese Americans, I would love to see the market for biographies open up more. But I also love, and I know Melissa loves this too, but a browsable expository nonfiction is also awesome. I really, I have to bring my older child in again because they're just little strange. They learned to read before they were one. I mean, around the age of one. I didn't even know that. But so at about the age of 3, apparently they were going into our adult reference books and reading those. My husband was gardening one day and Bryce was standing next to him, and there was some wiggly worm crawling by, and my husband said, "Oh, I wonder what that is," because it was something that he had never seen before, and he's a gardener. And our oldest child looked at it and said, "That's a wire worm." And my husband was like, "Oh, right, sure," thinking, "Yeah, I'm sure it's a wire worm. It looks like a wire." That's why he said wire worm. And he went to look it up in our Rodeo Organic Gardeners Handbook afterwards. And that's what it was. We had seen our kids sitting there reading that handbook, among other, reference books that we had, and he had just learned it on his own. So I just think that this whole, movement to engage kids more into science is awesome, because I really believe that that's the sort of environment, having access to, these awesome science books just lying around. We didn't tell them to read, they just read on their own, is what led to their current career as a grad student in evolutionary biology. So direct connection. No, I don't know. But yeah, so I really think, and we need more scientists because, well, we solve a lot of problems. Not that we don't need the arts too, which is why, I'm into STEAM also. I think we should pull the arts into it. But I just think that we need more scientists. We need more diverse scientists to help solve more of the world's problems. And the world has a lot of problems. I hate to be one of those people who are like, doom, but we have a lot of problems. So, and having just the diverse kids doing science brings different perspective, because we're so different with the different cultures that we grew up with. So it just brings a different worldview, a different perspective, and that's why it is important to bring diversity into STEM, into kids' lives. And there's a hummingbird right outside my window. Sorry. Okay, I'm done.
That's great. We could all look at our windows and notice something. So Alyssa, I will follow up with you with the question about trends that you're noticing. Where do you see the future of STEM and diverse children's books coming together?
Okay, well, like Teresa says, the party line is that there are too many picture book biographies and the market is saturated. But I really honestly feel that, you know, we still need more picture book biographies about people of color and other diverse people. I mean, they are still absolutely necessary. So I do think those are going to keep on coming. I'm seeing a lot more fiction books, both picture books and chapter books about kids of color who love STEM. And I love all that. But we need to give young readers more options. So like Teresa said, like Melissa said, I want to see that expository and browsable and all kinds of different STEM nonfiction written for diverse kids by diverse authors. Diverse authors, we need a range of topics from them. They should write about whatever sparks joy and curiosity. So for example, I'm working right now with a Black scientist on a nonfiction book about friction. And it's not diverse in any kind of way, but material science is her passion. So a kid who picks up this book is going to learn about friction and is going to learn all these cool facts. And then it's going to see like, wow, this author is a Black scientist who can really write about science. She's amazing.
Thank you. And so as we are wrapping up our panel discussion, I'm just wondering if you could each share your favorite diverse STEM children's book. I know some of you already have, and it's okay. Maybe you'll be repeating yourself. Sabrina, I don't know if you have a favorite.
I actually have two. My first one is God, I have five, but I have two. I absolutely love just random books about any kind of STEM, but my favorite one is actually Rainbow Fish. That's Ada B, the scientist, is another one. I like Vegetable Soup and I like Feast for 10. I can't really wind it down to just some. I just love all STEM related books because it allows for the students to have critical thinking and problem solving embedded into their learning style. So I can't really choose one like a favorite song, but thanks for asking.
Okay, and Teresa, I know you mentioned your own book, but I don't know if you want to mention another one or another book, somebody else's book that is a favorite.
Yeah, sure. In fact, I do have one fairly recent one that I love. I love a lot of them, but this one is by Patricia Valdez. We were at NCT together and presented a panel just this past November, and it's called How to Hear the Universe, Gabby Gonzalez and the Search for Einstein's Ripples in Space. And I love that because I love astrophysics. That's my jam.
Wonderful. And Alyssa, I don't know if there's another one that you want to mention. You held up a couple of your favorites, I think, already.
Yeah, so I actually pulled Not a Bean. Yeah, I love this book by Claudia Guadalupe Martinez. And it combines nature science and math, Spanish vocabulary, Mexican culture, and diverse kids. So it's really got everything. And the sequel is Not a Monster about axolotls. It's awesome. I highly recommend both. And I didn't edit them.
Okay, and great, interesting. Yeah, there's so many interesting books out there, and I am looking forward to reading a lot of them and learning more about this topic, along with all the other teachers who are learning more about these topics as they're picking up children's books. And I think that we are transitioning to the Q&A right now. And so I think that Jessica and Kristen can turn their cameras on. And we have some questions in the Q&A box. And as Michelle knows, that is not always the case. So I'm excited about that. So I don't know, I'm just gonna open up this box here. So what happened to the first? Oh, wait, somebody answered one of the questions already. That's why. Okay, so somebody posted, I'm curious about the demographics of teachers and students in the research project described. Can you describe the cities, communities, and schools you work with? So I think Kristen did answer that in the question box, but I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, just bring to life the communities that you worked with.
Yeah, sure. So Jess and I, with the math work, we primarily worked in Head Start communities in the Northeast. So really diverse populations of students, which is part of the reason we work to make sure that the materials were accessible in multiple languages. So we have English, Spanish, Portuguese, and we've recently been translating the materials also into Haitian Creole to make sure they're accessible. And then I know Jess's SYSTEM project, the science project, was a really particular focus on multilingual learners.
Thank you for that information. Here's another question that we had in our box. What are some examples of great STEM biographies for young children? So a couple of you mentioned your passion for biographies. So I'm just wondering if you have any examples to share with the group.
One book that I'd like to share is called Joan Proctor, Reptile Doctor, and it's actually by Patricia Valdez, who is the same author that Teresa was talking about just a few minutes ago. So Joan Proctor is white, but she's differently abled, and that really adds a lot to her ability to find ways. She is known for being one of the first scientists to understand and work successfully with monitor lizards. It's a really, really fascinating book.
Thank you for that example. And also, I'm glad you're here. I know I mentioned Jessica and Kristen. I was like, I was thinking you as a children's book author, but of course you are a researcher also. So I'm glad that you're part of this Q&A panel. And does anybody else have any biography examples they'd like to share?
Of course I do, but I'm completely blanking on her name right now. I recently read it, but she is a scientist who has autism. And she is the one, I just read it. There's a picture book. It was a little bit too high level for preschoolers, like too long for preschool, I should say.
Temple Grandin?
There we go. Thank you. Oh my, that was going to drive me crazy. So biography of Temple Grandin. So again, diversity in another way, where they talk about, in the biography talk a little bit about her autism and how that affected her, but also how much she really just loved cows, and then how she helped us, help the cows she invented a whole system to calm them down. And anyway, I like that one too. Just came to mind.
I was just looking to see, we have another message. I was checking to see if we have another question, but people are sharing their examples in the chat and in the question box. So you should take a look at what people are saying there for ideas. So this is a general question. What gaps exist in the current market or in educational practices regarding diverse STEM books? And so in educational practices, I will share that I do think that, especially as you edge into kindergarten and first grade, I think some teachers have a hard time understanding how they can build in hands-on learning experiences to explore concepts. And I love the fact that the children's books can inspire that in different ways. And so I'm just wondering if any of you could share gaps either in the books that are being produced or in ways teachers could think about using some of these books to address other gaps.
I think one gap is specifically within STEM is sort of the TEM area of STEM. There are more science books, especially life science. There's less physical science. Alyssa, very excited to hear about that book that you're working on fission. I can't wait for that. But also books about technology, math, engineering, we definitely need more of those.
Anybody else want to bring up a gap or a topic that you think that we haven't addressed that you think is important to address?
Sure. One other area where we found a gap when we were looking for science books that were written first in Spanish rather than translated into Spanish, because it's not always it's not always the best translation. And so that's one area where we're really I think it would be great to have more primary authors in Spanish. One of the ways that, because our communities are so diverse with lots of different languages spoken, is that we use wordless books as a way to share with families and with teachers. And of course, we showed a picture where you can notice and wonder, and you can really get into lots of different science and math concepts just from a wordless picture book. So that's just another sort of way we help to connect to families.
So I know that we are all excited about hearing the Teresa read aloud her book. I have one new question from a participant. So I'm going to ask that question and someone can answer it, and then we will move on to the next part of this webinar. What tips do you have for teachers who want to read more nonfiction for read alouds, but are nervous to transition from the performance aspect of fiction stories that they may be more familiar with? So that's an interesting question, and I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I actually have a whole section on my website that talks about this. I have a presentation that I give in PDs as well, if anyone is interested in that. But if you just go to Melissa Stewart Author, that's my website, and then there's an educator section under that. And then you'll see an icon that is talking all about nonfiction read alouds. So it talks about how to find great nonfiction books for read alouds, both expository and narrative nonfiction, some strategies for reading those books aloud, and also ways to interact with students during the read aloud process. So you might want to take a look at that.
So I want to thank the participants for asking such great questions. We don't always get that, and so that was really exciting. And I want to thank all the experts and children's book authors who participated in the webinar for providing such wonderful information and experiences and thoughts. And now I'm going to transition to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you to all of the speakers and panelists. It was so wonderful to have you. And just to wrap up today's session, we get to wrap up with the joy of a read aloud from the author herself. And as we're bringing up the PDF of the story, just to share a little bit about Teresa, a little bit more. I know we heard from her directly, but she is an award-winning author of Queen of Physics, and she writes both fiction and nonfiction picture books, middle grade and graphic novels, mainly about science, nature, and her own culture. She has some recent works that have come out, Clouds in Space, Nebula, Stardust, and Us, and Who Smashed Hollywood Barriers with Gung Fu, Bruce Lee. And she has some other upcoming books as well, which we're really excited to take a look at. So now that we have the PDF ready, Teresa, I'll turn it over to you. So excited.
Thanks so much, Michelle. So I'm just going to launch right into it. All righty, Queen of Physics. In China, in the small town of Liuhe, the Wu family celebrated the birth of a child. The child was a girl. A girl. What would become of her? In those days, girls were not sent to school, not considered as smart as boys, and certainly not encouraged to be scientists. But Mama and Baba Wu did not feel that way. They believed girls should go to school and could become anything they wanted to be. They knew their daughter would be smart and brave, that she would make a difference in the world. Baba named her Qiansheng, which means courageous hero. Even before Wu Qiansheng arrived in the world, Baba had quit his job as an engineer and opened the school just for girls. Mama wore her shoes out, trudging to every house in Liuhe to urge families to educate their daughters. So when Qiansheng was ready, a school was waiting for her. Baba was the principal and Mama the teacher, teaching little girls to read and write and count. Baba and Mama were courageous too, as they showed their daughter the way. Soon enough, Qiansheng had learned everything she could from her parents' school. She knew how to count and to add, subtract, multiply, divide. She knew how to read and write hundreds of Chinese words with their strong dots, angled lines, and wispy tails. Qiansheng was ready for more. But in the 1920s, the next closest girls' school was in the city of Suzhou, 50 long miles of bumpy, dusty country roads away. She would have to live there far from her family and could only go home for winter and summer vacations. Mama wept, Baba worried, but they knew their daughter had to brave the world to grow. Qiansheng knew it too, so off she went. The school offered two programs, teacher training and academic. Qiansheng picked the free teacher training program, but she peeked into the academic program textbooks and saw that they covered so much more. Science wasn't just science, it was biology and chemistry and physics, all connected by the lovely language of mathematics. And oh, physics. Physics, the study of the very matter and energy around her, the study of things that could be seen or felt, heat, sound, light, electricity, and motion, and of things too minuscule to be seen or felt, atoms, and even tinier parts of atoms. Physics captured her heart. During the day, Qiansheng attended her own classes. At night, she studied the academic textbooks she borrowed from friends. She called it self-learning. It was a habit she would keep up for the rest of her life. Her classmates noticed that Qiansheng worked extra hard and was not afraid of challenges. They asked her to be their leader in their underground group to fight against the government. Citizens were not allowed to say what they wanted. If they supported the wrong political party, or said the wrong thing, or happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, they could be punished, perhaps even killed, by the government, by the warlords, by rich and powerful foreigners who lived there. The students wanted someone brave to lead them. They asked Qiansheng, what would she do? What could she do? Baba had named her courageous hero. She would live up to her name. With her days full of classes, homework, secret studying on her own, and leading student protests and strikes, Qiansheng had little time to miss her family. The years flew by. Now 17 years old, she graduated with top grades. It would have been easy to go home, but she took the harder path and traveled to Nanjing 3 times farther than home, or from home rather, than she had ever gone before, to attend the National Central University, where she immersed herself in her favorite subject, physics. Once again, her hard work and determination made her a leader among the students. Wu Qiansheng led the march to General Chiang Kai-shek's headquarters, where she and her classmates urged the government to resist Japanese invaders just before the start of World War II. Like a seed that must fly far to flourish, Qiansheng set forth once more in 1936, this time to Berkeley, California, thousands of miles across the ocean. She was going to continue studying the physics of atoms. Scientists understood atoms, but not completely. If people knew how atoms split, they could use them in new inventions and technologies, perhaps even help doctors treat sick people. She focused on beta decay, where a nucleon inside an atom broke into an opposite nucleon, an electron or positron, and a neutrino. It was like opening one present and getting 3 different gifts inside. After California, Qiansheng went to Columbia University in New York, where she continued to explore beta decay. She was careful, she was precise, she conducted experiment after experiment until she had a deeper understanding of beta decay than just about anyone else. Her reputation grew, and physicists who couldn't solve their own problems came to her for help. Scientist Enrico Fermi said that electrons should have had faster speeds when they burst out of a neutron during beta decay. He couldn't prove it. Nobody could. But Qiansheng could. Because she understood beta decay so well, she knew what to look for. Because she was such a careful researcher, she was able to run a difficult experiment that proved Fermi right. Many people thought that Qiansheng should have won the Nobel Prize for this work, but she did not receive it. When 2 physicists, Yang Zhenning and Li Zhongdao, questioned something many scientists believed, that nature did not distinguish between right and left, a concept of symmetry called parity, they asked Qiansheng to investigate. Because she had worked on parity in beta decay, she knew just what to do. To focus on the project, she even canceled a trip to China, a rare chance to see her parents for the first time since she left home for the United States. Her hard work paid off. Her results proved them right. For this, Yang and Li, but not Qiangsheng, won a Nobel Prize. Another two physicists, Richard Feynman and Murray Gell-Mann, asked her to check their hypothesis about a special expression of beta decay. In her usual thorough way, Qiansheng ran experiments and confirmed their idea. Many scientists praised her for this important finding. Yet, for the third time, she did not get the Nobel Prize. Sometimes Qiansheng did not get the job she wanted either, because she was a woman, because she was Asian. Was she sad? Yes. Was she disappointed? Often. Was she discouraged? Occasionally. But she did not let those feelings stop her from doing what she loved, because Baba always said, ignore the obstacles. Just put your head down and keep walking forward. There was only one obstacle she could not overcome. Because of World War II, the political unrest in China afterwards, and her focus on her work, Qiansheng was not able to return to see her parents before they died. My heart was breaking, she wrote to a friend when she could not attend Baba's funeral. Still, in her new home in the United States, Qiansheng continued on her courageous path. She fought prejudice against women and Asians and became such an exceptional physicist that the Smithsonian Magazine called her the First Lady of Physics Research, and Newsweek declared her the Queen of Physics. And that is how a small girl from a faraway village in China went to school, proved herself as smart as any boy, learned to be a scientist, and even became a queen. And there's a whole long glossary back matter after that, which I will not read.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It was such an honor to end today's session with such a powerful story of perseverance and the courage of the Queen of Physics. Before we wrap, I just want to highlight some of our partner resources. So I think we're going to get the slide deck back up to show, because Charles Bridge Publishing has offered a 35% discount on anything ordered from their website if you use that code READER, and that will be live for the next 2 weeks. So please use that code and purchase all those wonderful books and titles that we heard about today. Another resource is from our partner in the Diverse Books for All Coalition, Room to Read. They have, the next slide. They have a suite of books that are available online at no addition, for free, that you can, we'll put in the chat the link to those books. So they have a whole Steam book collection, and they're all available online, and then you could print them at no cost. So you could just print them yourselves and use them as you like in your classroom. So with that, I just want to encourage you at the end of the session, when you log off, a Survey Monkey will pop up and it'll just provide us feedback on how on today's session. We really take this feedback, and that helps us to inform future sessions. So please take the 3 minutes or less that it'll take you to complete that survey. So with that, on behalf of Raising a Reader and the Diverse Books for All Coalition, I just want to extend our deep appreciation for all of our fabulous speakers and to all of you, our participants. So this was our 4th webinar in our series, and we hope that you'll join us for our next one, which will be around back to school time. Date still to be determined. But thank you again. And again, the recording will be sent to everyone who is registered.